Hi, my name is Hannah Villegas, and today I'm going to be talking about cognitive development in infancy. Cognitive development in infancy was developed by Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget, he was a psychologist that created important theories of stages of development in children. One of the important stages that Piaget developed was cognitive development. What is cognitive development? According to some researchers, cognitive development is defined as the process or changes in thinking, memory, problem-solving, and other intellectual skills. It is also the development of a child, infant, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Basically, it's the development of the child, how the child is growing. In order to exactly know what the child is doing according to their ages or how the child is learning, Piaget developed several stages of process. According to Piaget, children learn through schemes, assimilation, accommodation, organization, and equilibration. Let's analyze deeply these processes one by one. What are schemes? Schemes are a mental representation that allows infants to distinguish familiar and unfamiliar. This allows infants to do simple activities such as looking, sucking, and grasping an object. An example of this is when a baby accidentally stuck his or her finger into their mouth, and later on they repeat the same action intentionally because sucking their finger is satisfying for them. Basically, schemes is the information produced by experience and are then stored in memory. Assimilation and accommodation. These are another the adaptation processes in infants. Assimilation in children are during this process, children are allowed to take new information into their brains and incorporate it to their current knowledge. An example of this may be when children may have schemes about different animals, but the child only experiences with cats. So when he sees another animal such as a lion, tiger, or a puma, he says that these animals are cats because his only experience are with cats. And another example of this would be of assimilation would be a computer technician. The computer technician is learning how to use a new computer program. He has other experience with computers, but he's using his previous experience to operate the new program. Assimilation is changing the existing knowledge in order to fulfill or incorporate new knowledge to have a better experience. An example of this in children would be the same concept of cats. The child sees any felines animals as cats. The mom or the dad of the child explained to the child that those animals are not cats. They look like cats, but they come from different habits than the cats. Organization. It is the grouping isolated behaviors and thoughts into a higher order system, more smoothly functioning cognitive system. This is when children start to differentiate between objects, people, and animals, etc. For example, they start to differentiate between the sounds of two animals. They start to know that the cat meows and the dog barks, that these two animals make two different sounds. Equilibration is a mechanism that Piaget proposed to explain how children shift from one stage of thought to the next. This is when children apply previous knowledge, which is assimilation, to change new information, which is accommodation. An example of this is when children are learning different types of animals, foods, or toys that they like. Sensory motor stages is another part of the cognitive development in infants. These stages help us determine the behavior of the infants about the world. These stages last from birth to 2 years old. Infants start to learn how to coordinate sensory skills such as seeing and hearing. This stage has 6 substages. Babies go through simpler reflexes, first habit and primary circular reactions, secondary circular reaction, coordination of secondary circular reaction, tertiary circular reaction, novelty and curiosity, and internationalization of schemes. But what are these substages mean? Let's analyze them one by one. The first substage of the sensory motor stages are simpler reflexes. These are from birth to 1 month. This is when this is the coordination of sensation and action through reflexive behaviors. An example of these would be rooting, sucking, and grasping reflexes. Newborns suck reflexively when their lips are touched. The second substage is first habit and primary circular reactions. These are from 1 to 4 months old. Coordination of sensation and 2 types of schemes, habit reflexes and primarily circular reactions, reproduction of an event that initially occurred by chance. Main focus is still on the infant's body. Examples of this would be repeating a body sensation first experienced by chance, sucking a thumb, for example. The infants might accommodate actions by sucking their thumbs differently from how they suck on a nipple. The third substage is secondary circular reaction. This is from age 4 to 8 months. A description of this is when infants become more object-oriented, moving beyond self-preoccupation, repeat actions that bring interesting or pleasurable results. An example of this is an infant coos to make a person stay near. As the person starts to leave, the infant coos again. The fourth substage is coordination of secondary circular reactions, 8 to 12 months. This is the coordination of vision and touch and hand-eye coordination, coordination of schemes and intentionality. An example of this is an infant manipulates a stick in order to bring an attractive toy within reach. The fifth substage is tertiary circular reactions, novelty, and curiosity. Ages 12 to 18 months. During this, infants become intrigued by the many properties of objects and by the many things they can make happen to objects. They experiment with new behavior. This is when a block can be made to fall, spin, hit another object, and slide across the ground. The last substage is internalization of schemes. From 18 to 24 months, here infants develop the ability to primitive symbols and from enduring mental representations. An example of this would be an infant who has never thrown a temper tantrum before sees a playmate throw a tantrum. The infant retains a memory of the event, then throws one himself the next day. How do infants learn, remember, and conceptualize? This is another important thing of cognitive development in infants, is how do infants learn, remember, and conceptualize. Since birth, infants show evidence of learning, memory, and conceptualize. Infants learn, remember, and conceptualize through conditioning, attention, memory, imitation, and concept information. Let's analyze this one by one. Conditioning helps scholars to determine how infants learn or how infants do things the way they do them. Attention is when infants pay attention to certain information. Even human beings pay attention to a certain amount of time of information. The same thing happens with newborns. An example of this is when an older infant can focus a little bit more by 4 months old, and by 4 months old can have a stronger focusing in an object. Under attention, we also have habituation and dishabituation. Dishabituation is when babies increase their interest. Habituation is when infants lose interest in a game or an object that they already play with. For example, if you play peekaboo with a baby, at first you're gonna get his attention because he's learning how to play the game. He's gonna laugh and kick and do different things. But once the infant or the child starts to play the same game for several times, he's going to lose interest in playing that game. We also have joint attention. Is the ability to follow other person's movement or a toy movement. This is when children follows the person when he or she is moving away from him, or if you bouncing a ball, the child is going to be focusing on the ball. He's going to be looking at the ball when the ball goes up and down. That's joint attachment. We also have memory. Memory is the retention of information. It basically means what the child can remember or not. According to some scholars, children from 2 to 6 months can remember some experiences up to 1.5 to 2 years old. There are also two types of memory, implicit memory and explicit memory. Implicit memory is the memory without requiring conscious performance. For example, a 2-year-old remembers how to brush teeth. Explicit memory means poor memory. This means that it is hard for infants to remember things For example, a 24-month-old may not be able to remember what he or she learned the day before. We also have imitation. Infants learn through imitation. According to researchers, infants can imitate facial and sounds gestures from adults. Another type of imitation is referred imitation. This is when infants repeat the same action since they first saw the action. For example, if you constantly show the baby how to clap, he or she will probably repeat the same action after doing that action for several times. And concept formation. Concept formation is when children group or recognize similar objects, people, etc. It's when when children are grouping shapes according to the color, size, texture, etc. Or when he or she recognizes a family member, when he or she recognizes people. How do we measure intelligence in infants? Intelligence is determined by measuring the infant development and predicting intelligence. Developmental scales. Developmental scales are IQ tests to determine the intelligence of each child. For example, we have developmental quotient, an overall score that combines subscores in motor, language, adapted, and personal social domains, and the GESL assessment of infants. Bailey scales of infants' development are used to assess infant behavior and predict later development. How does language develop in infancy? Language is acquired by following certain rules. For example, language rules and systems, biological and environmental influences. But first, let's analyze language, or let's talk about language. What exactly language means? Language is defined as a form of communication between humans, either by speaking, writing, or by a system of symbols, which is sign language, by signs. There are 5 rules in language. The first rule is phonology, is the sound system of a language, including the sounds that are used and how they may be combined. The second one is morphology, which is the units of meaning in words formation. The third rule is syntax, which is the ways words are combined to form acceptable phrases and sentences. Semantics, the meaning of words and sentences. And the fifth rule is pragmatics, the appropriate use of language in different contexts. How do language develop? Language develop through recognizing language sounds, babbling, and other vocalization, gestures, first words, two-word utterances. The first development in language is recognizing language sounds, which is identifying the sounds of the language, babbling, another vocalization, practice making sounds before recognizing the words, Gestures, which are pointing, waving bye-bye, nod yes or no. The first words. When babies understand the words before speaking those words. The fifth one is two-word utterances, consist of combining or using two words such as my toy, verbal, book there, etc. When children start to combine two words to communicate. Children also acquire language through biological and environmental influences. Children learn to speak through biological influences. This means that in order to talk, it requires certain vocal apparatus as well as nervous system with certain capabilities. Certain parts of the brain need to be used in order to communicate. Some biological bases that need to be used in order to talk are Broca's area. Broca's area are on the left frontal lobe of the brain, which is involved producing words. Wernicke's area, which is a region of the brain's left hemisphere that involves language comprehension and language acquisition device, a biological endowment that enables the child to detect the features and rules of the language, including phonology, syntax, and semantics. Environmental influences states that language is acquired according to the languages environments that children are exposed, which is how often children hear words. In conclusion, every human needs to go through certain stages in order to master their development. Every child has a cognitive change. Cognitive changes allow children to develop their own abilities, emotions, and personality. Each of these stages make every child different and unique from the others. To do this presentation, I got the information from the book Children and the book Lifespan Development.